Hear, O Israel, thou art to pass over Jordan this day, to go in to possess nations greater and mightier than thyself, cities great and fenced up to heaven. Get thee up into the land that is over against Jericho, and behold the land of Canaan, which I give unto the children of Israel for a possession. For the Lord thy God bringeth thee into a good land, a land of brooks and water, a land of wheat and barley and vines and fig trees, a land whose stones are iron, and out of whose hills thou mayest dig brass, a land that floweth with milk and honey, as the Lord God of thy fathers hath promised thee. For thou art an holy people. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth.
This God, the Lord God who gives away whole countries, is the God the English Bible called Jehovah. The land of Canaan that he gave to the Israelites was a tough little bunch of city-states set between Egypt and the Lebanon. But who on earth were these Israelites? There's almost no trace of them in the ancient world. You won't find a museum anywhere that has an Israelite gallery in it. Yet Israel's history, as it's written in the Bible, has become a part of Western history. So it's hardly surprising that generations of Westerners have been tempted to return to this ancient land, to look for their beginnings.
You know, just behind me is the very mountain where Satan took Jesus and tempted him with all the treasures of the earth. And Jesus said to him, "Get thee behind me, Satan." Do you believe the Bible? Can you prove it? Well, we live in a scientific age, so people often ask scientists, archaeologists that question instead of priests. As if you could somehow go out and dig up bits of the Bible and prove God. Sort of digging up God, almost. A bit of a lumber, really. And if you believe in the Bible, people just think you're preaching at them straight away. You say, "I have found a wall from the time of King Solomon," or something. It's a hopeless situation. But in actual fact, it's very important to compare scientific history and the Bible. I tell you why. Because it helps us understand something of the motives and methods of the ancient people that wrote it. And that's important for us because their ancient words have such an effect on us still. Look, just down the road from here is the town of Jericho. It's a famous town, you know, the one the trumpets blew and the walls fell down. It's the first town the Israelites conquered when they entered their promised land. They crossed the waters of Jordan. They'd escaped from slavery. They had the Ten Commandments with them. Can you think of more potent symbols for our time and place? So sometimes it can be quite good to succumb to the temptation of trying to fit the Bible and archaeology together to see if they'll match. These great mounds of red earth are the remains of the ancient city of Jericho. It's fascinated archaeologists for over a century now, this rich city at the edge of an oasis by the River Jordan. They've hacked at it, dug trenches through it and argued over it, and found wonderful things too. But at the end of the day, the most important thing they've given us is a good idea of how the Bible's word may or may not be trusted. Even if the Bible had never told us that Joshua and his Israelites came through here, Jericho would still be one of the most famous cities on earth. To start with, it's the oldest city on earth, and it was built at the lowest point on earth. This stone tower, nearly 10,000 years old, is the oldest stone building in the world. When it was made, it stood on a plain. All these huge mounds of earth around it, archaeological strata, represent various cities that were built up through the ages. It's actually an incredible time chart of man's progress on Earth. Somewhere in there, then, might be the dust of ancient Israel, perhaps even the Bible's characters. Joshua, Samson, David, perhaps King Solomon even, and his 1,000 wives. The archaeologists that dug out the tower continued their trench right to the outside of the city. And as they cut through the mound, they cut through the city walls of various ages, like the rings of a tree, getting ever later as it got to the edge. This is one of their walls here. One of the walls they uncovered. It's a rather unusual one, dates from about 1600 BC. See, it's got a nice, shiny plaster surface on. Now, these sort of walls came into existence just after chariots came into the area. What they were for, of course, was stopping charging chariots, because the chariots would skid on the shiny plaster and run off the wall that was at the top of them. Archaeologists were digging things like this up all over the place, but everybody was giving them different names. To some people, this was called a Hyksos wall, who were the people who attacked it. To other people, God knows, it was probably called a Joshuaite wall or a Kenite wall or an Adamite wall or any sort of a wall, usually biblical names, because the sponsors of the expeditions like that sort of thing. In 1922, the British decided to put it on a scientific foundation. The man in charge of the archaeological mandate of British Palestine, John Garstang, decided to name all of the strata in archaeological excavations after the scientific terms used in European museums. That is, Stone Age, Bronze Age and Iron Age. So that everybody from that moment on had to call their various stratas after those three things. Now, the particularly interesting point was the point at which the Bronze Age met the Iron Age, because that was about 1200 BC, and that was the point at which the Israelites were supposed to enter ancient Israel, with Joshua and everything. Now, so far, Garstang's been completely scientific, but at this point he succumbs to the temptation of reading the Bible into archaeology, and instead of looking for that joint between the Iron Age and the Bronze Age, he went looking for Joshua and the invading Israelites.
Good morning, brother pilgrim, pray tell me where you're bound. Tell me where you're traveling to on this enchanted ground. My name it is Bold Pilgrim, to Canaan I am bound. Traveling through this wilderness on this enchanted ground.
That morning
Joshua fit the battle of Jericho.
Oh
Jericho,
yes, so
Jericho.
glad that
Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls come a-tumbling down.
That morning
Joshua fit the battle of Jericho. Jericho,
Oh yes, so
Jericho.
glad that
Joshua fit the battle of Jericho, and the walls come a-tumbling down.
That's where Garstang found Joshua and the Israelites at Jericho. This, he thought, was a late Bronze Age wall. Look, you can see the beautiful big Bronze Age bricks, these lovely brown bricks set in the wall here. And notice how they're all tumbling away at the end. Reminds you of Joshua's 7 blasts from 7 trumpets at 7 circuits of the wall, and the walls came tumbling down, doesn't it? Actually, Garstang was a good archaeologist. He didn't believe in miracles. His suggestion was that there had been an earthquake. There are lots in this area, and the walls had tumbled down in a convenient earthquake. Well, he published his book, and it had a picture of this wall in it and of the city that's behind the wall, and it said, the city of Jericho on Joshua's arrival. And everything seemed fine. The Bible and archaeology had been put together. There was one major snag, however. Years after Garstang worked here, somebody came back, Kathleen Kenyon. She was a very, very good archaeologist, and she had much improved techniques. And she proved, without a shadow of a doubt, that this wall was 1,000 years older than Garstang had thought it was. So it couldn't have belonged to the time of Joshua and the Israelites. She proved something else that was even more devastating too. She proved at the time that the Iron Age and the Bronze Age met, the time at which everybody was expecting the Israelites to get here, there was nobody living in Jericho at all. The place was completely deserted and had been deserted for hundreds of years. So at that moment, it looked like the Bible and archaeology would never meet. That story of Garstang's walls and Joshua and whether he was or wasn't there, it's been repeated hundreds of times since those days. All over Israel, in fact. People keep coming up with new walls, new evidence of Bible characters, and both the walls and the Bible characters get knocked down again in the following generations. It's an endless, endless argument. But the simple result of it all is the Bible cannot be taken as a reliable, obvious guidebook to the ancient world or ancient history in this part of the world.
The problem, then, is not whether or not the Bible is accurate, but how the Bible is accurate. What I mean to say is that the Bible is not an economic or a political history of part of the ancient world. What it is a history of belief, of God revealed to a nation and how they believed in him and didn't believe him. It's a history of sacredness and of faith. Now, the wonderful thing about modern archaeology is it's beginning to dig up that. That's not to say they're actually digging up God or digging up Jehovah, but they're digging up the circumstances in which that particular God first came into existence. In the dark recesses of the Cairo Museum is a great grey granite stela that holds in its inscription the first known mention of ancient Israel, and that in the year 1207 BC. The stela has a victory hymn on it, telling us about a war that Pharaoh Menepetar's army fought in Canaan. The fortress city of Ascalon is taken, it says. The fortress city of Giza is captured, it boasts. The fortress city of Yanoam is disappeared, no less, it announces. And then, and this is their good bit, the people of Israel lie desolate. Their seed is no more. Now, it's especially interesting that Israel is not called a fortress city, but a people. And in the great temple of Karnak in Upper Egypt by the Nile, there's something that bears that out exactly.
A few years ago, a friend of mine found a wonderful visual footnote to the Israel stela, and he found it on this unlikely-looking wall. See that stela there? It's a very, very important historical inscription. And the scenes on either side, everybody had always thought, were part of that same